Christmas crickets, apparently. All that music Grimner just played for a couple of hours ahead of time of the broadcast. Appreciate that, Grimner. I guess I'll wish you a Merry Christmas, Hana Kwanzaa, Rama Lama, Ding Dong, Geista, Mithra, Grishna. Happy holiday, and I hope you all have a cool Yule. We can get lost in all the holidays, or we can realize it's a serious, serious thing that we're up against. As you see, everything turning toward an economic or monetary commercial nexus. Even the holidays, the holy days, the whatever you want to call them, they were just facade. We have to get beyond. We have to grow up and start to take our responsibility by the horns. We've been being played as people for forever, I would suspect. Those few that start to get it usually get taken out or threatened enough that they just capitulate. And so there's this this internal dynamic within that line. How much do you do? What do you make the decision? How much do you capitulate to the reality of your demise versus whether or not you can kind of skinny on through and just become more of that continuing witness for other people? And I think a lot of us today, not a lot of us, a few of us today, I guess I'm one of them, I'll say it that way, had to make that little line. I told you about the little lizard losing his tail. You lose a little bit. You can do everything you know to do, and you realize the corruption is reality. So you decide that day, do you get thrown away and thrown in a hole for 10 years of your life, or do you say, okay, well, this capitulation is really just the realization of the corruption. And to escape a worse fate, I will go ahead and capitulate just a bit in order to free myself of that ultimate control. And I'm going to turn my life to something now that I realize is real. Not opinions, not the book learning, not the dictionaries, but something that's literally right there in our face that they were so stealthy to bring in on us. And a bunch of stealthy things came in on us as a people. And we were told, you have a republic if you can keep it in the United States of America. That, I told you last week, was the challenge. That was the license of those that made that so-called republic, the so-called sovereign. That was the challenge, when these people wake up. I told you a long time ago, when the woman that they talked to on the steps, that we're told the story goes by, because that's all it is to us as well, is a characterization, a symbology all of its own. Remember at the time, and even today, I know you might get a little bit upset here, women, but this is the reality. Women had no rights, and when they were given rights, they were given the rights that men had. And then you look real closely, men in the New World had the rights of the obligation to protect themselves. And that was the challenge. And upon the clause, the savings clause to the criminal, if you can keep it, you've watched the plunder. And we're in the day when the plunder is about done. And we've now moved into Never Never Land on what they will use. Your very existence, your life processes now, or life's processes now. These people were brilliant to figure this out. Your life processes are now considered a harm to the existence of the world. Well, not the world, the earth, the life itself. Now, I've told you before, what is taxation? You see, what am I talking about? The carbon fraud system they're trying to put on us. The new monetary system. A tax is always charged against the activity, and I use that in its general term, not just a business conduct, but in all activities. The activity of something, and typically an entity, which causes a harm, the tax you pay for is to compensate from the common coffers to pay for the harm. In other words, let me put it in this way, guys. If you drive a motor vehicle, which is, most people think it's everything on the highways, but listen to the common one that everyone thinks, and you go and you pay tax on your fuel, that tax is to be used for maintenance for the harm that was done by those vehicles traveling over that surface, that property, the highway. The tax pays for to mitigate the harm, caused by the activity. Now, fees are for a service, but they're getting this commingled. But understand what a tax is. So, by the fact that they've made this carbon tax and taxation on life processes, says, by definition, your life processes, or all life processes, are a harm to itself. Which, by that definition alone, you know we're dealing with it's a complete insanity. It's a complete insanity. And no one's called this out. No one has really sat down to think about some of this, and I can't say I have thought about everything. I've just thought about what I've thought about. I've probably done some things that thought about a lot of stuff that maybe people don't really consider sometimes. It gives me my view behind Woodshed. That's what I bring here every week to try and expose the discussion through that view, that at this point, and I look real hard because I've learned more and more I do these things, you're looking for where you're wrong as well as advancing upon what you have researched is correct. And a lot of that has to translate from what you thought you read into practice. That's what I hear a lot of people doing. It's probably my main gripe. I hear lots of people doing lots of learning and very few people actually putting in practice. And then they try to we get the news of the people putting in practice what they haven't yet figured out wasn't going to work. And before I go I'm already off on talking other things like I do. I put all my tabs up. I should be going there and going quickly through them because there's just so much to say, but there's always this new thing. Listening before to Ron Steffen's program, Game On, and hearing that people are in the courts really drives me nuts. I don't know what it is about it. I start to actually get lost in, well, they should be doing this and they should try that, and it's all really trying because you're up against the corruption, but so when I say try, I mean actually stick it in their face what you're supposed to do and call them out for the criminals they are in a way that they can't get you. So you make the evidence and you create these records that are showing you the very thing that everybody who does this research knows. It's a corruption. As I tell people, in fact, it's happened a couple days ago, and it happens all the time with anybody I'm working with. I have to remind everybody, you're making a record to expose the crime against us. So you don't make a question out of what you know is fact. You make that crime. You will use that element as the declaration of a crime against you. And you set that against their fraudulent assertions, charges, interferences. And so nothing's a silver bullet. As I told you, I've already got the experience of when you face abject corruption, there's not much you can do but go ahead and capitulate. Because the question then becomes, what are you going to do better? Where's your best position when you're facing a military order that just as soon see you dead as use you for the beast of burden that you've been put into? And so that's why I say this is a decision that every man or woman has to make. This is not what I've learned like I said, I get gung-ho. As soon as you see this, folks, in fact, it's happening now with a couple people in the mining community, if I can say that word, the miners. People are just taking all this time and they're really starting to see, and you should see the excitement. This is what I tell you I can tell really quickly. If I have to push you or drag you, you're not putting up the energy because this thing is so obvious when you see it that you become almost an overnight zealot. It's really cool to watch. You see the problem and then you want everybody to know about it. But there's a reality that I just want to advance to you. And everybody goes through this. I did it, and then other people do. So I try to get people down off of that zealotry, if you will. It's not a bad zealotry in this regard, because you're doing it to help people. But it's something that's overwhelming to those people. And so you have to tone down your enthusiasm for wanting to tell them, because all that you can do is essentially witness to them, only to the extent they can hear it. And this is a real fine line to be making. That's why I say bring evidence first. Bring a document that's not you. Bring something that's independent of you. You have to kind of, even though you're right there talking to them, you bring an objective basis that can't be viewed as opinion to everybody on a particular subject matter you found they are interested in, not what you're interested in. And so, the way... when I hear these things like on Ron's show, people going to the courts, and we all know they're corrupt, And then you got to go look, and you think you're looking at the statutes like you think you know how to read them, and the definitions and all this other, and all this stuff that comes into play. And I look at this and I say, all that basic foundational knowledge almost never comes into play. It sets you up to understand the demons you're dealing with. Now you have to deal with them on their terms. Why? Because they're actually in control. And if you don't cede that authoritative, their control over you at that moment, to them, you will not defeat any part of it. If you resist, they'll fight you. If you approach them with their own failings, now they can't. And so I don't know if I want to say more about that. Every case is a case by case with no guarantees. It's why you don't hear me talk about a lot of this. I can't tell you I can tell you there's a couple answers, but even so, let's say like on the administrative rules for minors. I mean, I can tell you that the rules say that it's not applicable, and every minor that I have that works, I work with it, that finds out about this, that does it the way they're supposed to do it, doesn't make excuses and doesn't drag their feet about timing and all that. When they just do what they're supposed to do, they are not subject to the administrative rule. We never get it into court. We never get it into these hard times. Why? Because we've established the separation before. And there's a whole methodology behind this. It's not real complicated. It's just understanding what the authority, that authorita, is imposing upon you. It's wrong. It's a crime against you. It's knowing that's the fact, and then making the record to show that in fact is the fact. And you're going to get out however demonic it is that you're up against will be the measure that you get back out. That's it. That's the limit. The limit is to the abject demonology that's coming against you inside the system. And if they just don't want you to do it, they will put the heaviest penalties against you. And they will put you up against your own principle to say, it is honorable to consider this, but it's really not practical honor. It's really not understanding a dynamic. To say that my principles better stood to, in all cases, to withstand against and take the punishment. That I think that you're doing it potentially wrong, or you're not realizing a reality. If you commit after that and you have to make a capitulation to a stronger force that could destroy you or destroy some aspect in you, I don't know that can be faulted against you. You take your best angle. And I mean, that's another different judgment. And so I hear lots of people. I've told you, my friend, he'd fight this thing right to the hilt, and they would punish him pretty hard, to the point that his principle he would hold so hard that he would actually hurt himself while he was in jail. He would stop eating. And I watched that in him, and I admire him for that. But practically, in the war, it means nothing. They'll hurt you. And so now you have a practical thing to look at. He did everything he could do, and he was still set to a point of torture. What's the principle in conceding a bit of that reality to be able to come out and make it more difficult on them? Because now you know that. Because this is where they get us. We go in there thinking there's justice. We go in there thinking these institutions are Republican form representative government in the proper way. We don't realize they're the occupation in lots of different ways. Well, so one of the new occupations with this is coming on us is this fraud called climate change. And I'll move over to how do we deal with this thing. So I try to show you in what you do locally, you can do internationally. You can start withholding your consent. You can start giving your voice out in a proper way. Let me address one quick thing about something I heard, and I don't know nothing about it. It's just a thing that goes on. I'm going to talk about it in a generic sense, because no one really knows until we hear the facts about what Ron was talking about on his show Game On, and I think, and someone else was with him there, maybe Chris. But at any rate, excuse me for not remembering. But they talked about the court was telling the guy that it was gibberish, and the response was, well, that it must be right what he's talking to the court. I'm going to have to tell you that maybe not. It may have been gibberish. But there's two answers in the gibberish. When you hear that, when I hear it, I've never heard gibberish told them what I say, but I've kind of gone a little bit different path. So I learned a long time ago, you have to communicate with the way they understand, otherwise they too call it gibberish. But that points out another thing. The gibberish in the beginning stages of the case is everything you say is gibberish unless you have an avoidance or a plea. And so everything else at the point of being irrelevant. I'll use the word in the definition of gibberish in the terms of irrelevancy, immateriality, or impertinence, that kind of thing. The things that under the rules you would strike. Relevance, pertinence, and materiality are the things that you would strike if something is not one of those, is one of the rules. That's what the judge could be saying. When something he sees as gibberish, it means nothing. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean something. It means that it's not proper in the moment that you need it. And you should have been speaking in the point, if it's at the point of plea, you should be talking about avoidances. And I usually do those written pre-plea remedies in avoidance. They don't tell you about a lot of this stuff. And I don't know about Canada either. So I'm talking generally. I'm pointing out to you that we don't listen to these guys who know what's going on, these judges that control our lives. And we need to listen to them. I don't need to agree with them, but I need to listen to them. And there's paperwork that needs to be filed, and you'll find this in any process because everybody's under the rule of law. Most everybody is anyway. They're going to have all the same due process essentially. And there's going to be a way to avoid the jurisdiction. Whether or not you do is a different story, but you're going to be able to make the record that you attempted it on the proper point, not the gibberish, on the proper point. And so when I hear a judge say you're doing gibberish, I have to think really careful. I'd ask him, at what point? Now, why is that gibberish? I maybe want to get in dialogue. Why? Because you're making a negotiation to arrange that jurisdiction. That's what arraignment is, arrangement. You're arranging that's the court of competent jurisdiction. And there's a due process requires a right of avoidance in case it doesn't. And without saying anything about what people should do or what you have in your tool and arsenal, your avoidances are all those things that would keep that court from obtaining jurisdiction over whether it is the person, the subject matter, or the location, the venue, by venue. You have all these things sitting there that need to be documented ahead of time. Whether you do it by proof or a return allegation of fraudulent imposition or mischaracterization on the part of the state. That's what you put in. You don't talk about your rights. You're talking about the jurisdiction of the court at arraignment. Hopefully you're filing pre-plea. So I went off with, I don't know what the answers are here. I just know that everyone seems to be thinking they read the rules, they know what's going on, and a lot of people don't do it right. They don't talk with that authority, that imposition that's criminal, in the correct way. If that sounds bizarre enough, I know, but this is the reality. So it hurts me when I hear this, but I also don't, and I want to have statements to make, but I have really no answers. People, you all have to do this. I try to tell the minors, each one of us have property. We are individually obligated. It's like a servitude we put on ourselves to protect our own land that they grant to us. I've been trying to bring what I have found to show you how the state cannot come back against people who have this land. How you extricate yourself from the tenancy requirements that they put on when you do your own filings. People want to argue with me on that. People want to come and bring the dictionaries, which is fine, but that's not the way it works. It's not the only way it works. They may give you a fantastic foundation, but that's supposed to be used by your foundation. You don't lead in the actions with your foundation. You rely on it. And so there's a way to approach this. It may or may not work because there's a corruption. And you can't go by what anybody else says, because if it becomes a pattern, the system will denounce it. It doesn't matter how good it was. You have to come at it on your own. I told you already the experience, the knowledge, and then applied knowledge. When we went to the court, I had my friends ask the cop whether or not he was a man. The answer being by the judge, who now interferes with the testimony and the production of evidence by saying, if I allowed that fact in evidence, that officer acknowledged that my friend was a man, the state, could no longer prosecute anyone. And he denied the existence of that evidence in the record. When you see that, you have a whole other thing to think about. It's empowering at some level. You realize that there's no opinion here. You're dealing with a beast that can hurt you. And you're going to have to make your decisions on how you go about that. The decision was then taken from my friend to be able to avoid the jurisdiction, and they found him guilty on it. It was a traffic issue. It wasn't traffic. They mischaracterized the complaint. But I had identified how they were doing it, and I had him ask the critical question. They wouldn't recognize pre-plea remedies and avoidance there. So we did it again on the questioning. We had the officer testify as to the mischaracterization, and it wasn't allowed. It wasn't going to be allowed on appeal either, even though we made the record. So you say, well, what's the purpose? The purpose is to count it out. I can tell you in all truth, I can tell you in all straight honestly, I can tell you by experience, now wisdom, that if you're a man, and that gets on the record, the state has no authority over you. Does that mean that you say that and you win? No, they're going to deny that in the evidence. Now you got to rethink, how do you address these criminals? And that may take you on a whole other journey. And that's really kind of where I said, okay, those guys are doing exactly what we thought they were doing, how they're doing it, that they're going to do it, and they're going to continue to do it. And there's really no right paper or right thing you can correctly put in. How do you address this? And that got me, in looking at how to do this, through the mining law, to the lawsuit that we filed, that exposed these guys for the criminals that they are, that we are now in the process of working toward enforcement. You have to understand the problem. If they are the jailers and they are the wardens, they're the criminals. You're asking organized criminals. You're walking out in the street and you're asking the organized criminal gang to stop hurting people, stop hurting you. You're all by yourself. What's the odds of that happening? And that's where we find ourselves today. But that should concern you. If we're having to do that, Jefferson Mining District and a couple of named parties have to do that. And we're the small little band of miners that are saying, you, organized criminals, need to stop what you're doing. And we're here to say that. And the odds are not real good that they're going to listen. When are you going to step up to join up to help support the fact that we've identified that everybody's being oppressed? So from traffic, through understanding, application, getting the facts and the reality down, and addressing those facts and reality have been a course you'll never find in the books, because the books are there to keep the system in control. We still use the rules in order I use them to expose them. In the lawsuit, I use those rules in order to trap them. This is not dictionary reading. This is taking the fact that when you see a dictionary that's got a term that's got more than one definition, that those are jurisdictional. And you have to remember every one of those, and you put them in a category, and you say, okay, when they use that word and you see the effect of it, you know they're working with that definition. That's how you address them. You have to be mobile. I'm talking now in esoterics. No one will understand until you start doing it. Only those people that have known that have done it know what I'm talking about right here. And I apologize because I have no way to describe it to you. I just know if you adjust when we talk about terminology, that's why I go to the Title 42, Section 1981. They use the term exaction. That's there's a couple, but there's just one of the only terms. I have to call them terms because they're not words. This one may be a word, actually, because it's the only set of characters that has one definition. One. There's no other way to take the term exaction than by what it is, which is extortion. And it's not even that. It's even worse than just extortion. It's that in the definition, it's the ability to the lawful right to extort. If you look at that Title 42, Section 1981, I almost get chills every time I think about it when you read what that says and you understand what they're saying. You understand the prison that you live in. You can't approach this like most people do. You can't approach it on what you find on the internet. You really have to slow down and think about it. And so it pains me to hear people in these, like the guy who is, in a way noble to stand up for his principles, but knowing full well they're using that against him as well. Not that he should necessarily capitulate, but that he may have to have more tools in his basket, his work belt, to go after the travesty, the criminality that just happens to have him in jail for 34 days. So, way off of what I was going to talk about. But this is the rule of law plunder system. It's global. Democracy and rule of law are everywhere. They're utilizing it through the UN. They're utilizing it in the way they're bringing on this climate change. And so it always fascinates me to watch, as I tell you behind the woodshed, we're looking for evidence of their crimes. not so that we move it outside of opinion. That we have something in our bag of law and our bag of facts to bring to someone to shut them down in their thoughts that they think they can outdo you or they think they can move somewhere. And you make them make a decision that outs themselves as the criminal. You don't do it. You let them do it. This is probably the most peaceful thing I can think to do in a war. Is this what I can see that we do here? You don't have to tell anybody that. I don't think that we've ever called anybody a criminal until they've admitted to it. We don't point fingers. Like I said, don't be careful. You point a finger. You're gonna start pointing a finger. Maybe you got 3 pointing back. You missed something. Because what that should be doing is you should be just looking at the guy or the woman that's just admitted to it, and then you both know. But now you're dealing on the morality side of it. Because you find out you already know the laws aren't there. Laws are legal. Legal needs to have moral component. There are no laws. Okay, that's the reality. So don't go spouting laws to a system that can't hear them. You spout the process by which they're plundering against you, and you expose it for what it is. And so what we have here is evidence. I keep looking. I just go along, and this stuff just pops up. I thought this morning, I got so many tabs now to talk about. This stuff is so much in our face, and my frustration is no one else seems to see this. Not that I'm saying they see it, that they see what I see, that they don't use it. Go local. Become vocal local, as you heard William Roberts tell you. He did it a little differently. His objective was different, but the statement is identical no matter how you come. I don't care who comes at this. You come up with the same answer. You have to take on the responsibility to become your own advocate against the plunder. There's no other way to do this. And I'm sorry. I'm not really sorry, but I'm sorry. And I'm not a sorry, but I'm sorry to have to tell you that, but that's the reality. I have a friend of mine I work with extensively. He gets it. He's on his own. He's running down his trail. I have to really watch out, keep up with him because he's running on his own trail. He says his point is, he says that his phrase is, the simple reality is. And I thank him on air. If he ever hears this broadcast, thank him for doing what he does. And I parroted back his phrase the other day. I said, listen, the simple reality is, just as you say, the simple reality is this. Do not disregard that. You're going to have to address that simple reality. This is not that complicated, was the point. Don't stray off of discussions that aren't the simple reality. And this is really essentially what you're looking at. Pre-plea remedies and avoidance at the point prior to plea. As soon as you plea, you've accepted the jurisdiction. All those other objections are waived. You now have only rules by which you move. And the rules can still be used to reassert all that if you know what you're doing. Not that it's that complicated. You just got to know how to do it, actually. The exact same arguments, but in a slightly different context, to put the second threat on them about how you're going to go. Those are the pre-trial motions. See, pre-plea remedies and avoidance aren't by motion. So anyway, going back, that's too much. So we're told, we're given evidence all the time if we would read it. And I told you even the last few broadcasts, I've been telling you, look, it's down to sentences. It is a sentence in these articles, and I'm realizing that's why I think I've stopped reading these articles. You read a lot of blah, blah, blah until you get to the point. You got to go read through. That's the time waster to get to the point of the truth that exposes these things that we can then use for our facts. We should delineate them as a point on a piece of paper, a numbered point, an alphabetized point. If numbers go longer than alphabets, so I usually start with numbers, to make a list of numbered facts that establish elements which show a cause of harm that is actionable. That we are been denied and talked about. Remember, I talked about it was admitted in the Bar Association's House resolution bills that sustainable development was Agenda 21 in Europe, that they didn't tell Americans that it was Agenda 21. In America, they denied it to us. That geoengineering wasn't admitted up until they had to admit to it. Then the UN came out to admit to it, of all things, not the governments. So you have to push in order to get the oppressor to admit. And you have to push in certain ways. But for those of you that are listening, that have this as your passion to stop. See, I don't know who has what. I just know that that's a target-rich environment that we have to engage. Every one of us finds we have to do it on passion, because if it's not passionate to us, it's like any other hobby. It doesn't work. Won't work. You won't be that guy that stands up and says no. Whether or not that was proper, whether or not that ultimately works best for him is a whole different question, but you won't be that one that sets up and thinks you can say no. You won't have it. You will not have you preface that no with a set of facts that throws the burden on the other side to have to force them to explain or have it sit as a festering wound in the record. Whether that's just in an oral discussion or in writing. I tend to like to go to writing. I tend to understand what they talked about, that every contract has to be in writing. I understand why now. It's why all laws, so-called, statutes, ordinance, and other military impositions are done in writing. It's the objective black and white that cannot be changed. It's what they've agreed to. It's what they put on you that you are imposed and presumed to have agreed to. See, these courts are also courts of presumption. That's the pre-plea remedy avoidance. You have to destroy those presumptions, every one of them that you can find. That's not gibberish. Talking about your constitutional rights in an administrative commercial court, that's gibberish. They don't care about all that. It doesn't talk about necessarily talk about the jurisdiction. That jurisdiction has been established through that Constitution somehow. And if it hasn't, that's not being challenged. You can't just say the court's a corporation, the state's a corporation. You got to prove it, and that corporation wasn't in service of the people. You got to prove it, not in long-winded discussions. By the law, a simple statement does this. If they want to ignore that, you now have them outside jurisdiction. You have another remedy that you can develop. And what you're doing is making the record of their criminality. Do you think you're going to get justice going to the organized criminals and saying, stop selling drugs to my kids? No, they're going to probably shoot you or maim you. You got to go smart about it. So here we have no other information. This carbon fraud that they're putting on people, the fact that they can't, if they're really important and did things, that we would be having technology developed, we'd be putting money in technology instead of thieving it from you, from an imposed, presumed mortgage on the earth that you have because of your existence, a tax on your existence of your life. Aircraft contrails could be unintentionally changing the atmosphere and exposing us to more solar radiation. Researchers warn is really a laughable title, but there's a lot of untruth in there to be pulled out as truth. Unintentional? They're now admitting that these contrails are unintentionally exposing us to more solar radiation. That's a lie. But the point is that they're now broaching this whole subject to people. Unintentionally? Contrails? When you look at what they're talking about, they're not talking about contrails. They're talking about them persistent contrails. Another euphemism. They're admitting in this article that they are now thinking that maybe the jets are unintentionally changing the atmosphere. And then their hypothesis of exposing us to more solar radiation, that's just another lie, but here's the point. It doesn't matter what direction it goes. This condition, now, whatever those things are, whether you want to whatever name you call them, whether they are contrails, which really can't last more than about 15 seconds, or persistent contrails, which are actually some kind of a aerosol that isn't going to evaporate. If it's an oil, it's not going to evaporate in the atmosphere like water, or why the contrail goes away, is re-assimilated. That these have the ability to change the atmosphere as it regards solar radiation. This article tries to bring up a whole lot of failed theory. Tries to make it real, like it's there, so they get you to, this is the dialogue, they get you to capitulate, to agree that all these things are what you're seeing. Oh, but we're going to agree they could be unintentionally. Remember, all lawyers say deny, 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 never admit. So even this article is a denial, but it tells you that they're now concerned about it to let you know so that you think they're on the job. That I read through all this nonsense, you read, I get down to one sentence that tells it all for me. For all of y'all that didn't realize, didn't believe it when the UN got all serious about admitting that geoengineering was happening, and it wasn't just limited to those things you saw in the sky all of a sudden that make your sky all crazy. They say right in this story, right here, this little report, to give you notice. They say these news is government notice. When you found out that the media was government propaganda, this is your notice. This proved, I don't know if anybody put this together, what I've been saying forever on my broadcast, it proved out when they said that they were removing, like I said, we talked about last week, I think it was last week, what the Smith-Mundt removal of the illegality of being able to propagandize to you. When they did that, they proved exactly what I've been telling you, that these news articles are notice to you. They're actually legal notices. Truth or not, there's still a notice. But right here it says it. While still, and they're talking about particles, of these ice particles that come from the water vapor from the jet engine. Let me tell you something, folks. You got to go look at the function of a modern jet engine. They're bypass engines. They take a bunch of air and they run it. They only use the engine to turn a turbine that can bypass. It bypasses 85% of the air it moves around outside of the combustion process. So there's got 85% of clear air being compressed back through the blades and then mixing with 15% by volume, I understand, with 85% air at the end. That's almost impossible for a modern jet engine to even have a contrail. A contrail. The moisture within the combustion of a hydrocarbon fuel. It's almost impossible. That you see any at all is a miracle. I mean the real ones. That it persists is impossible. That they agree right here, with respect to the water particles that turn to ice, that they say are the problem. While still in the sky, the particles scatter the sunlight in a similar way as in other geoengineering projects. Was all I needed to hear about this whole article. I don't care whether they're lying to me or not. They've agreed they're doing other geoengineering projects, and they've done it, I know, under Title 50 for my knowledge set, and I know that they are doing it because you didn't step up and say, hey, I don't consent to that. Whether they listen or not is irrelevant. They admit right here there are other geoengineering projects that put pollution in the air, while they have already and also admitted that carbon dioxide is some poison that isn't going to hurt you. They will allow this over carbon dioxide, the excuse, the bludgeon that they use while they're admitting to these things. So this sentence right here, what other geoengineering projects that spray aerosols in the air, folks? Together with the UN geoengineering admission, this serves together to show you that there's something going on very, very dastardly. I'm telling you, not your opinion that you found. I'm showing you how you show it to other people. Ask the question now. What other geoengineering? Did you know they were spraying aerosols in the air that work like this problem? Why are they doing that? Then you go back to the top. It's not unintentional, is it? As I pointed out, you can find the lie pretty quickly. It's not unintentional, folks. The stories are set up, but it's notice to you. It's going on and what's going on, and they know it. They claim ignorance, and they move on. No one yet has stopped them. Nobody in sufficient numbers anyway, for sure. That's why we were talking at the mining district meeting. We need no more numbers for certain types of enforcement actions. We have an enforcement action that we need to do to keep the republic, if I can say it that way. That limited form government that actually sat to do what the Declaration of Independence in the beginning says why governments are founded in their best nature. And I understand that from a different perspective, being inside a mining district that was essentially local government. Most of the mining districts were the first governments, but they weren't like we see today. And that's given me the observation, the appreciation of what a government is, what it is when people are required because of their property rights to be involved and not allow others represent them. Because see, representation in any form or fashion is mere agency, and the agent cannot be held liable for the principal's wrongdoing through the agent. Just the principal can. That's why no attorneys go to jail. Guarantee you the attorneys start going to jail as a principal, we change overnight. Oh, we don't have any attorneys. Oh, and we're free at last. Thank God Almighty, we're free at last. But we're going to have to throw them out again. Remember, mining districts booted, kicked out, run out on a rail every lawyer that came into a mining camp. Ran them out. Ironically, here in the 21st century, I suppose we could say, a mining district steps up to root out the Bar Association. That's that lawsuit that we did. We had to do that again. We did it in a legalistic sense, more of the paperwork filing, the more formal way. We didn't get to smell the hemp rope and listen to the tall oak tree straining under the weight of a parasitic body. This is what our civilization has done to us. So we did it that way, and we prevailed, and now we're going to have to get the criminals to answer to that. But they move in this fear set for them and you, and they work under, they want to promote to you that they don't know. Unintentional. Do you know trespass is still actionable, folks? Do you know that? You don't have to, in trespass, there's no intention required, no knowledge. It's not a crime. It's a violation to property and to people. It's a disrespect that's actionable. A trespass in your air that's actionable. Where's the crew of people? I hear this, I'm going to get his name, Dane Whittington. Where's his thousands of people working to find out who these guys are? I don't know why he doesn't have an army. And then I listen to his words and I realize why he don't have an army. I have a serious problem with his actual position on this. And then the term controlled opposition pops up pretty quickly. Don't know the man. I like what he started out with saying, but I've heard him talk about stuff, and it just falls apart quick. And maybe that's why they don't have the army of people worried about breathing their air that really don't go after the things they need to go after. If you find who's spraying this stuff in the air that now you find out is affecting the atmosphere, and you claim a harm for that effect, and you can show it, you can bring those people to court as a trespass. Not a crime. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we doing this stuff? This is what kind of bothers me at some point. That we come on and they say, well, it's unintentional. We didn't mean to do this. That doesn't remove the culpability, folks, even on the civil side. They may have extended to themselves immunities within the offices. That doesn't mean you can't pull them out of the office. And I got to get moving here because there's evidence is that this is what I've been saying here and what we do and what we've done and what I advise people to consider are things in the world that need to be checked and challenged that most people don't do. But right now, if you didn't know it, a hasty, fearful passage of cyber security bill recalls Patriot Act. Recalls in the fact that it's how the Patriot Act was all set up and pushed through. Congress easily passed a thinly disguised surveillance provision, the final version of the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act, or CISA. Remember, we were all into that, and everyone jumped on that? Well, Congress, these sneaky parasites, see, they don't work for you. They got in there Friday and shoehorned in a must-pass budget bill to prevent the shutdown of the government before the holidays. Oh, so Merry Christmas. What was it? Merry Christmas, Hana Kwanzaa, Ramalama, Ding Dong, Gista Mithra, Krishna, Happy Holiday for all you federal workers. And of whatever faith belief you follow here. See, there's no, like gender neutrality, there's neutrality everywhere. There's no diversity. We're already there, folks. They shoved it in on through the surveillance bill. It's worse. They're saying it's worse than the Patriot Act impositions. And you think, what could be worse than the Patriot Act? Told you folks, it's coming. It's worse, though. When they went extrajudicial, NDAA, when I went to crickets, this is just the coming on the backwash of that. Born out of a climate of fear. Why is your representative so-called, even the pretenders there, working from fear and not reading bills, and no one stops it? This is in law. You're going to start absurding law. Each branch is to check the other branch. In fact, what I thought the government was actually more correct than what they've imposed upon us. In fact, that each branch, where they say they're supposed to be separate, they're not as to the inherent power within each branch to check the excesses of another branch immediately. There's no process they have to go through. One's supposed to be looking at the other, and when they stop doing that, you know you lost that republic, and we were supposed to step up. And we should have done it early on because they got too powerful now. Well, I think we better rethink this idea. Oh, we have the right to bear arms, and we have the right to abolish the government. Folks, they got around us. What I wrote back in 1995, they got around us. We were a drunken people. And now we're still even drunk and no more, and we're thinking we're going to do something in our stupor over this condition. That I think we have to do two things here. We firstly have to understand, well, get sober, get responsible, take to task the occupier, do it in a way that breaks the revolution, the circle of history we're on, that brings us back to where we even need those arms. Those arms are the only thing that's kept the tsunami of oppression off of us. They really do have to approach us differently that way. But it doesn't mean that they can't. At one level, they're doing it pretty, if I can say it this way, humanely. They know to do it that much. This is that international imposition about getting the people to put the gun to their own head and pulling the trigger. That's happening. The division is one of those ways to do that. But born of a climate of fear combined with a sense of urgency, it's flight or fight. Fight. This is supposed to be a legal entity, not something with a human or man responses, animal responses. Now they're making you think that this government's got animal instincts, and they're not going to be circumspect enough to step back for you. You shouldn't be happy with that, even if you don't consider yourself part of it. See, you're in it whether or not you like it. They're going to affect you. You better figure out where you can throw in. Born of a climate of fear combined with a sense of urgency, the bill claims to do one thing: help companies share information with government to heed off cyber attacks. Okay, enough there. I'm just telling you they passed a bill. They're claiming it's in the dark at night. It was still passed, folks. These Republican Democratic parties, they're just parasites. They're the enemy. They're the people. I don't care how you keep voting them in. They're still. I don't care who you put in there. There's a system that you're dealing with. And so you got to figure out. You got to really sit back and rethink this one. I've had to, and so I focus my energy on certain things to the exclusion of a lot of other things. And as I say that, I just can't help thank you for all the gifts and donation this season here, because it's helping for those things I don't normally get to be able to do when I'm focused. This is the kind of thing you have to do. I don't know. You can't get yourself down, even maybe as far as I've allowed myself to get, but you have to sacrifice something against this. If you have any concept of self-respect, in my opinion, you have to have enough self-respect to defend yourself and those you love. And they're giving us every opportunity to know how they're killing us over time. I've been moving on to the judiciary. It's out there to give notice. You know, it's like I see this stuff and you think, well, that's justice, or this is the calling out. Well, no, they don't. This doesn't work on its own. Someone has to pick up the baton that was just dropped here and move it on. I've been talking to you about rights of child, the UN rights of child. It's been an abomination like all the other things. They use the women, the human shields, the animal shields in the child, the woman, and the indigenous. They didn't. The Indian people, the native people, haven't suffered enough. They're now being used as a stalking horse. I talked about this so long ago. I can't. It's like I feel like I'm repeating myself. Maybe that's why people don't listen. They realize I'm only going to say the same thing, and I'm tired of hearing it. And they haven't decided to really step up or step in, and so they're going to go listen somewhere else. Somebody that excites them. But here's another notice to us. Rights of child, the system they did was a system of plunder. I'm not going to go on too deeply because this would be near and dear to my heart. This is what allowed me to see that I had to be a lizard to lose a little bit of my tail instead of letting the eagle, so-called, take me out completely in action for over 10 years on a trumped-up charge due to a so-called motor vehicle law that they would not properly apply and would not admit that I had done it correctly to avoid it. That why they did that, it looks like, is they took out a documentary I was making to expose this very system, which I was able to predict on through, remember, in Sandusky and the judges in Pennsylvania said, no, there's a bigger system of corruption around youth and kids over there, and you're going to find that out. And sure enough, Sandusky thing came up, and then I said to watch out because of who they're talking with. It's going to Britain, and look at what happened in the BBC and now all of Europe. This is systemic across the world, that I got taken out on this very position of exposing this so-called foster care or child services. This is a human trafficking in children. They put a nice shiny face on the outside, but you don't see what's going on behind. That this little story right here is another proof of that people have to step up with. Shows that the government's not a benevolent society at all. They don't care. Judge finds Texas foster care unconstitutionally broken. A federal judge ruled Thursday that folks, I read this stuff, I don't even want to read it. I just know. You have to understand the harm that's happening to women and children. They normally pick on women and children that have broken families. This is why they broke the family. They're not bashful to go after the family with a father, and then they take him out. They find legalisms to take him out, whether it's traffic charges or other things, whatever they want to. They get you. They make false charges for anything that's endangering to the children, so that you look at the father instead of the system. And these women that I interviewed, broken, still fighting. You want to talk about champions in the life, a hero? You go watch a mother fighting back for the daughter or the son that was stolen from them. And they're willing to do whatever the state says, and they can never do enough. 10 years of hard labor trying to get your son or daughter back, and these people are being put through slavery and torment. Do you want to talk about a hero? Someone who can't escape? That's a hero. I'm looking at these women saying, you can't get out of this. You might as well just walk away. And you know what? Then I said, wait a minute. You can't walk away. You have to be there. Why? Because if you don't, the son or daughter becomes fodder within the system. If you forget that one is in there, or you let the system make a obstruction, they will abuse that one for whatever. It doesn't have to be like we hear as the heinous ones, to death by whatever abuse, or sexual harassment, or abuse. No, it's just the torment. It's what they do to them inside. It's how they invigorate their internal support systems in the system, whether be it medical or psychological or care systems. They just feed themselves with this. These families are broken. They're broken down. And the system's not just broken, it's criminal. And when you get a report from this federal judge saying this, I don't care how incompetent he actually is, as far as his jurisdiction and venue and all this good stuff we're supposed to remember that they're supposed to keep track of, when this guy that's not competent can see that, you know how bad it is. A federal judge ruled Thursday. There's people behind this decision, folks. Broken, destroyed, in fact, killed. A federal judge ruled Thursday that the Texas foster care system for nearly 30,000 children is unconstitutionally broken, saying the kids rescued by one of the largest child protection theft agencies in the United States often leave state custody in worse shape than before. I don't even want to read more. It really angers me. For those of you that have sons and daughters, for those of you that have had them stolen, folks, especially in Texas, you need to rally up together and go after this. I don't know where you would take this. I don't know. I can't focus and thin myself down so much to start thinking about it. My mind will start working on it, and I can't do that. You have to use this, folks. This is one of the main. My reason for being here is because of this situation. And you have to understand, folks, this is me just looking on the people that I saw getting hurt. I don't have a son or daughter to protect here. I don't have one under threat. This is just a wrong that needs to be made right, and I'm not a party principal in this with a son or daughter that's affected to make a change of it. All I could do at the time, and it didn't work. I failed. I'll readily admit to you, I failed. But I didn't, did I? They took me down to take me out. And I'm actually fortunate. I'm still alive. A lot of people that do this that got documentaries, they're not alive anymore. Not that I say that's better. I don't know what's better. I'm just saying that's the end result. When you want to really step in and do something, that's the reality. The simple reality is you live in an open-air prison of parasitic plunder. And until we get to terms to that and deal with it locally where we are, the wrong we find in us that needs to be made right, this will continue. Here's evidence that you can use. However, you have to go look at the case, and however it can be used, that you have a notice of what I've been trying to tell you, what you already know if you've been involved. It's not an opinion. This is not something they're going to easily wiggle out of. These things were set up to destroy us, and we weren't vigilant to throw them out. And we make a lot of hullabaloo, an administrative, bureaucratic delay to shut them down. We allow that justice system to sit there as the pressure valve that never really allows us to get justice. It puts the actual non-justice and delay. Delay is injustice. It's not an immediate fix for an immediately identifiable harm. Trespass is immediate. It's irreparable harm in a lot of instances, where you are separated in your mother and father's status by a mischaracterization of a parent over a child. You have had your rights as a mother and a father outside the system destroyed by a system that had no jurisdiction to come outside of itself to attack you. If you knew these things were to be said, that's also an avoidance right there as well. It's all the same stuff to say on all of this, actually. There actually is a boilerplate to this, but I can't produce it because it'll be dismissed once you get it produced. This is the internal problem. We each have to know what to do without finding the boilerplate template that says this is the winning paper. There is no such thing. It's only you knowing that they're criminals and not calling them out, but moving into a position where you expose the record that shows that they are, and then take what you can get as best as you can get it. Don't compromise on what best you can do. And build your evidence so that more people can see this. Because there is a day of reckoning coming, I think. I hope. I work for that day. I hate to use the word sacrifice. This is a war. You just do what you got to do, folks. Like I told you, sometimes if I think too hard, I don't know why I do what I do. So I don't think that way, because I know what we're doing is causing difference. It's removing obstructions in certain spots. It's removing oppression. It's bringing the light onto the criminal. Even the little bit. It doesn't take much light in a dark room to expose someone standing in there. And you could be that little point of light that we heard Bush say. See, they're using the whole concept against us as well. But federal judges have declared this state system unconstitutionally broken. I cannot see how any of them are constitutional. They come out of the imposition of a family court system court that was international in its authorities. Family court is not normal. You find it anywhere. It's an invention, and it's an invention inside the corporate structure. And I don't mean, the government's a corporation. No, you got to find a statute that proves it. Don't just blab this stuff off. Find the place that says it's a corporation. Now you put that on your heading. One element, in fact, is the government's a corporation. It's not a government. Now, you deal with them as a private party. Where's the nexus? So there's no nexus? You show there's none. You make the allegation there's a mischaracterization of the nexus, and you make the burden on them to prove where it is. And you don't use a presumption to do so. The presumption is the proof that it never does. It was a fact, because they have no jurisdiction over the subject matter. You, the man and you're the woman and the product of their union. The words are here for us to use in a non-gibberish way, and applied back in a non-gibberish way. That, I'll tell you, on the other side of gibberish is the fact when they say it's gibberish, but you've said the proper thing, that just proves that you can yet not enter into an arrangement, can you? It means your languages are not the same, and your next question is, well, what are we going to do to mend this language disability that we have? Bring your representative for how we're going to mend the language disability that we've created. Because I'm speaking one language properly, and you're speaking your language properly, but we need an interpreter, and it can't be your agents. But more importantly, when we spoke in different languages, you've proven that you don't have jurisdiction. We're not speaking in the same tongue. We're not speaking by the same term. Why is this so hard to bring out? Why do I see hundreds of papers written in documents that never bring out some of these more simple requirements of the law that are written right in the law to see? It's not. I do something more approachable to me. It was what we call code pleading. You actually use the rules that they recognize, but you use them in the way that they were meant, not the way you were told. And that takes a lot of research to find out the foundation for those things that I tell you now, if you go look for pre-plea remedies and avoidance, I suppose you won't, and I haven't looked recently, but you probably won't find anything about it. That requires a long-term, I did this by accident, a long-term study, keeping track of certain things, and then one day finding out they're there and what those things are. And then the penny dropped for me on all that I'd read about things that cause a jurisdictional separation, a jurisdictional non-joinder, a jurisdictional unattachment, a pre-jurisdictional inability to attach. All these things are right there to throw out. And you don't talk real, you just make the fact of their problem. Anyway, going on. So we jump out of fear. For rights of child, we got to help the children. We got to help the women, and they destroy them both to destroy the family. These are all United Nations impositions. This is all the climate change impositions now coming in. They're amplifying this very same. I don't even know what. It's a fraud. It's a felony. It's a crime. It's a treason. And where I heard Corbett saying that Soros has been underneath the skin and not being noticed, folks, he's coming out because of another reason. The Patrick Wood that we heard on that also saying that the corporations are the ones being beat down on through this, what he calls the technocracy rising. I don't agree with Patrick Wood as to the importance of technocracy to the totality. I agree that it's a tool to bring on this other thing. It's just a tool that is their monitoring, their data collection monitoring for purposes of analysis set of the 4 steps they take to take you out. That even all these foundations are coming under attack is a different war within the war. That we hear Soros being instrumental, but I wanted to point out something that proves Agenda 21. This guy's a player, has been. We all knew that, but more evidence of the fact. The Soros plays both ends in Syria refugee chaos. Is Agenda 2030, is it not? Soros plays both ends in Syria refugee chaos. Both ends. Do you remember what I'm talking about when I read Agenda 2030? See, I read these headlines and I put them to practice. It's not just some, oh yeah, he's a jerk. No. These people are players. These people are in it. They're there for a reason. I may not be able to understand the whole reason, but they're there effecting a plan. They're taking the action I'm asking you to take to counter it. They're taking it to enforce it. Soros plays both ends, speaks to what? But the migration provision in Agenda 2030, the plan for the next 15 years to destabilize certain regions and cause migration, which the destabilization is part of the plan in order to weaken that and bring in eventual sustainable debt and that system, remigrating them back through a destination state, which will profit in many ways because of that migration there. Whatever that is, we're seeing right now they're using it for control, surveillance impositions, for movement control, for people, behavioral controls. And they'll remove them back and migrate them back to the other, it may not be where they come from. And they're saying, this is the news, that he is a set of foundations all over the world to be one of the players, to be in the double-ended profiteering that's going on. This is a proof of Agenda 2030 in play by these people who have been part of it. There's been question of who's the end player. Who's in the UN doing that? Well, it's the people that infiltrated governments to use them as their weaponry. As we identified in Kitzhofer, he was someone imposing an international agenda within the legitimate. He got an office legitimately. He was utilizing that office he legitimately got to do an unconstitutional and treasonous thing. That's what's going on. The system itself for the sake of itself, and then they got this mission they're on, this zealot mission that they're on. And you think, well, why is the oil companies involved? Well, because they're the ones with the biggest resource of carbon. That's what the bank's going to be about. See, they got the loopholes that they make more money because they use up, they're emitters of carbon dioxide. The backside of the taxation is that turns into money when they can claim that they sequestered it somehow. Oh, and they get big pat on the back about that. So you give it more. It's kind of like, it's almost in a way, it's like the Federal Reserve note. An interest. How do you pay 2 cents charged against the loan of $1? How is $1 worth $1.02? The carbon market's no different. It's only done through taxation. The harm that they claim CO2 is now, because it's a poison, is now mitigated by taxes, the tax laws of which allow credits for these people that are going to mitigate. You don't have access to that. You are going to pay on the uptake because you are a carbon unit that is taxable because you're causing harm. Besides, they made a false market. This is how this works. So Soros is in the news right now. He's not out there. He's not invisible. Russia's going after him. But Russia's going after him because I think they're part of the BRICS issue. See, they have to reduce this down into development bank control. And that ends up going through that IMF again eventually because of this sustainable debt system. No legal entity will be gone from it. They're all going to have to play the tax game. Soros is playing both ends already of the plan I read to you on air. The migration side. It says Syrian refugee chaos. He's playing both ends. What ends, folks? What ends? Just think about it. If I hadn't read to you that provision in the A2030, what ends are they talking about? Until you see that, you don't realize that you have a clue really what ends. The ends are the origin state, the origin state, that the refugee origination state, and the destination state. Part of the plan. He's in on it. I don't really need to know more. I don't have to think more about him. He's just telling me the fact that we're under an assault, a deadly assault, as a matter of fact. And we could be crickets. Sounds like we're going to be. And we could be crickets until the last minute where we have to go to arms, I suppose. How smart will we be then? So this, as I tell you, the reflection of what's going on in the Middle East, the mirror, that to me, I see that it can be to give us the reflection of what's happening to us. What the government for us supposedly is doing to others is a reflection of what it'll do to us ourselves. There's players playing, stakeholders. Here, Soros is a stakeholder, I'll put it in that term. He's in on it. He's a participant and he takes benefit. And he knows there's two ends. That's why he's playing each one. See, that's like the government. They don't care how they take it from you. They work both ends of whatever the imposition, the exaction, the extortion they put on you that's been legalized since 1868. Your civil rights is the right of the government and NGOs, if you look very carefully at non-governmental organizations or other entities like that. It's right, that's a C. Read it, it's right there. To extort from you. And I've been hearing cricket. I mean, we're all being blamed on that. How long have I even talked about 42 USC 1981? A long time, right? To me, I'm just repeating myself. I can repeat myself every broadcast. I can bring that up. I can show you how it applies. But how long are you going to listen to that? So I got to go around and I look around, and at least I'm thinking so, unless you got markonthebeast@yahoo.com. markonthebeast@yahoo.com to give me suggestions on how to do this different. And while I'm on that, it's been suggested that for mining issues that I go ahead and maybe take some time away and specifically maybe address certain discussions on forums, because they're very hard to explain in the chats. They're very hard to use text typewriting to explain some of these concepts that I think I could do. It's been suggested maybe I take one time a month and do that. Those of you that might be interested, markonthebeast@yahoo.com. Tell me that you're interested that I do that. Otherwise, I did this before and no one responded. I won't do it. I'm just going to go down and give you try to hit the general potentials out there for everybody to listen to, that maybe one day you'll find that you have enough in you to go out and do what you can do. And thank you for those of you that are, whether I know you or not. Thank you very much. I'm only trying to show you go more properly, at least, and I'm trying to bring what experience. I say I'm trying because I don't know if it's conveying. I'm trying to bring the experience that we've won, the wisdom gained from the thought of and in contemplation of that experience, to give it to you. Again, not to make a big thing about it. I don't charge for this. There's no remuneration to me over any of this. In fact, the networks don't even advertise. I've been told if you don't make it important to somebody by charging them a fee, they won't take importance on it. And I see maybe that's the truth. Again, not everybody. But there's a truth to that. Nonetheless, this is free for your discretion to take on what I'm asking you to look at. For those of you that feel there's a problem and don't quite know what it is and want to do something, I'm giving you the world here to see the reflection on us locally. That shouldn't be an excuse for what to go look at. The choice is difficult when you walk into a candy store. What candy are you going to choose? Well, folks, I'm asking you, just grab one and go to the counter and engage. Just start there. You know, there's nothing says you can't go back and grab another one if you think you can keep up with that. But when done right, it only takes one or two, and you'll find out how expansive and comprehensive the infiltration is that you're going to be dealing with. That Soros is an international player. It comes out in the news. There's two ends to the problem of the refugees. It exactly matches what I read to you at Agenda 2030. Again, that's only the plan for the next 15 or so years. Right? They're going to continue. It goes on. That you see, this is now part of that plan, and it's not part of anything you're being told, like about Syria. This is why they want to happen. This is why it makes no sense when you look at it, let's say, from a military standpoint. The Allies, so-called, the organizations that pay the mercenaries to fight for them in the United States, Britain, France, and all these, now that they have to now show up underneath the excuse that Russia now came in on, because now they see that they capitalized on against their own plan. These people that are paying the mercenaries over there, it never made any sense. That makes sense. That's one of the things that makes sense about this whole thing. The mirror for us is what they're doing to us in the same manner by different methods. We see the jockeying now. There's a lot of games, a lot of dimensions to this thing that's going on. I've been trying to bring out and show you. Well, a little story pops up. It was kind of interesting to me. It's, again, down to one sentence. Stunners to me. Doesn't really mean anything in regard to how it changes what I do, but when you understand the dynamic of the world stage, you can identify, well, I guess the liars. And I think it's important that we do that. The report came through as Zero Hedge. Syria stunner. Syria stunner. This was the stunner they headlined with. Until I got down to one sentence farther down. And I said, here, no, this is the bigger story down here. So I'm not sure whether Zero Hedge knew that or whether or not they were trying to disfocus some importance. But German intelligence cooperating with Assad. Berlin may reopen embassy in Damascus. That was their headline. The big deal was that Germany was was cooperating with intelligence with Assad. And then I got down reading, trying to figure out, going pretty fast. I got to, don't have a lot of time to really look at this. And I noticed a little statement right underneath the picture with Kerry, the back of Kerry's head, looking at Lavrov on the left and Putin on the right. Lavrov looks like a pit bull. He's going to chew Kerry's head off. And Putin is just sitting there as placid and peaceful as you can imagine. And I took note of that fact that, well, I didn't hear that Kerry was in Russia talking to Putin and Lavrov. They didn't make a big deal about it. This story actually makes a big deal that in Russia, Kerry found a Dunkin' Donuts. And then he was happy about that. But over the Syria stunner that Germany was dealing with, working with Assad with intelligence and opening a diplomatic connection, this little sentence pops up. The meeting that I see with Kerry, and this started me looking from a video that you're also going to get on the Blogcaster, where it came, I think, maybe from Press TV. The picture was Kerry at a meeting in the UN at the very same time. I go, what the heck are they focusing on this guy at the UN and saying that some agreement over Syria has been made? Have you heard about all that? Maybe you have, and maybe you haven't, and maybe not thought about that. This was a showstopper for me. In the sequence that I had seen this, because I'd seen the video the night before. In fact, I posted it on Twitter, behind a Woodshed, my account. I had posted this fact that there was an agreement made about Syria. Then I saw this picture with Curry in Russia, not at the UN, but in Russia. Well, this guy gets around. And the summarization by Zero Hedge was this. At the time, it was just a sentence that had no highlights to it. Kerry ended up conceding once and for all that the fate of Bashar al-Assad has effectively been backburnered for the time being. Kerry ended up conceding once and for all that the fate of Bashar al-Assad has effectively been backburnered for the time being. Now that statement was in normal print. When I wrote my tweet, I said, this is a bigger story here, this one. Well, I came back later that night, and now it's highlighted, that part. So I don't know if they were listening behind the Woodshed, or someone else really rethought about this and sent the word. That the United States is sitting in front of Russia, saying that they are going to backburner Assad, should just shock you in one regard. I mean, I've already called them buffoons to start with. So that's not the shock I'm talking about. Wasn't this whole threat against Syria based on getting Assad out? Remember, we were sending cruise missiles in on him. Remember also that the United States stepped up and told Turkey, send your troops out because you have no right to be there. I immediately retweeted, well, what right then do the United States have? They are agreeing that there's no right in Turkey to be there. What's their right to have gone and attacked Syria? But by whatever, by mercenary or otherwise, even to the point of attacking so-called terrorism and is. Remember, and never forget, is us. United States. Zio West. Qatar. Another influence inside a sovereign state, trying to take it down. That the United States said they're backburnering this rejection of Assad was the whole reason for the United States being over there. Is a sea change in this position here. The United States has just conceded it has no purpose in Syria. Now they're going to go on the heels of what Russia did. Oh, we got to fight terrorism, and is. It comes right out later though, and Russia and see, these people are very good at what they do here. Assad comes right back within a day and said the terrorist support. If you cut this terrorist support, the Syrian war would be over in a year. What's he saying? He's saying that when is us stops supporting those mercenaries, is dries up. Just like I told you before. It's dust in the wind. As soon as you stop feeding it, it dries up and dies. This is a fiction that's going against Syria. They're using it. The Russians were brilliant to use it the same to come in to defend. They came in and did not violate international law to be able to be there and not suffer any attacks. This was, in my mind, a huge story that says the United States conceded it never had a purpose in Syria. And that may not mean much to many people, but I'm looking at a government that I have to live under that's willing to be buffoons on the world stage, not get embarrassed, concede the obvious, and then the nation I hear is crickets. The nation of people that these buffoons represent is crickets. Oh, but we want to go bomb them, right? And then we hear last week, bomb, I put in the Spreaker lines, bomb, ban, and bomb. It didn't matter who you do, between McCain to Trump, one will ban their entry, then they'll want to bomb them anyway. We have no right, we've conceded, as a nation, we have no right to be in Syria, should make at least an eyebrow come up. It's why I could almost laugh at Lavrov, the pit bull. He's saying, I don't believe you, I'm going to listen to you closer. What are you saying now? And Putin saying, yeah, I know. You don't have, that's what we've been saying, you don't have a right there. And then Putin saying, now what's your next move? Fascinating dynamic. What's it end up going to mean? I don't know. You can very well believe that the United States is not stopping its assertion of Assad being out. You can also probably understand, and I don't know if Syria is doing anything good for themselves, making diplomatic relations with intelligence with Germany, because that will bring the diplomatic location to bring in everybody that's going to be a spy internally to Syria to take it down from inside over time. That's probably what they're switching to. But the dynamic of the concession that the United States was backburnering going after Assad was the reason for being of the United States in Syria. As I said a couple weeks before, that what's our purpose there before they even said this? What's our real purpose there? Now they've conceded they have none. And they just appropriated more billions to go support didn't they? Didn't the Congress? Oh, in fear. Oh, and we didn't read the bill. We're going to give more billions to these mercenary terrorists in a foreign land for which we have no purpose being. And they've conceded. The United States has conceded that. This is not my opinion. This is the stunner for me. It isn't the German intelligence. That's a side note. So I'm critical of Zero Hedge here, but I'm interested that maybe they listened behind the woodshed and at least emboldened that part that to me is the Syrian stunner. The United States concedes it has no purpose in Syria. Folks, I want you to ask you, the United States of America, what are you being crickets for on that? You agree now that we can go beat up people just because we want to? Back burner? Means you're still intending on doing it, isn't it? And it's not a valid point, is it? We also know that. That I'm hearing crickets is really indicative of the state that this state is in, the people and the government that supposedly works in their behalf. Again, more evidence that you don't live in the world that you thought you lived in, the nation that you thought you lived in, and you are under, it's more than threat. And what was fascinating in regard to this, and I tell you, I believe in coincidence. I may not know the meaning of a coincidence. Okay, a meteor coming out of the sky and hitting me in the head, that's a coincidence. Do I know why that happened? No. But I know it happened. That's a coincidence. So I believe in coincidences. They happen all the time. You're listening to me right now as a coincidence. Coincidence of time and maybe space. Does it have a meaning? I hope that's on you. I can only hope I put out the meaning. And it's up to you to receive it. It's always in the receiver, it seems. I can transmit all kinds. I have the right to speak. You have the right not to listen, I suppose. But interestingly, at the same time that the big giant, folks, when I was reading it, I was enthralled. I stayed up for quite a long time. I wanted to know more about this session of the United States purpose in Syria by the United States itself. I think I did kind of get chills about that revelation. They admitted we're criminals, folks. Abject criminals in the world. Thugs. Gangsters. How can you be proud of that? And then if you're not proud of that, how can you still live without saying something about it? I don't know. Where are people's minds about this? I'm fortunate I get to at least tell you about it. Hopefully I inspire some stuff out there to happen. I don't know what it's going to be or what it could be. We have to get a realization for us, though. We have to realize and denounce that is there any hold on us by these so-called authoritas, so-called experts, these people that were put in high places that are low lives. The authorita is in us, actually. The true authority. You can't deny your own, or you disrespect yourself. That's what we're talking about, is us. Yeah, is us now. Without the is. We each individually have to step up. And we have to denounce this lie that comes in it says it comes in our name, that supposedly represents us. You know, that's what we've identified. This false claim of representation is part of the method that's being used to take you out. They're doing it to the miners right now in Oregon. Again, the MMA-SEEK issue, the Minerals and Mining Advisory Council. There's an update to the Jefferson Mining District website. Find that RAND district. For those of you that listen to the broadcast and are interested, go to the web, jeffersonminingdistrict.com. Find the RAND mining district link on the left side of the page. Go there and get all the documents of what we did to expose that what's happening under MMAC. This voice, this single powerful voice for the miners, is a fraud. This is what they do. This claim of representation for groups of people, particularly landed people, producers, is the method that they're taking us out on. This is the same fraud that's happening that I see the picture with the back of Kerry's head and the almost diametrically opposed emotions faced by the Russian diplomats, Putin and Lavrov. The United States is representing us in that capacity that we agree with a baseless attack on a sovereign nation. Now, if we're going to do this, what kind of excuse do we have when they want to attack us? And that's just a joke as well. That's another tool. But so there's the tool, the terrorist attack. The whole thing was about terrorism, right? Now they're even using the excuse of is the thing that's going to dry up and blow away when it doesn't give it any air anymore. It'll just dry up and blow away. Assad, they already know this. They know why it exists. What was the motivation for this terror? And again, coincidentally, at the same time we hear someone has done a study. Again, we know, okay, maybe we have to really be cautious of the study, but let's look at this a bit. I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater as much as I possibly can. I want to know, again, there might be in a full body of work one sentence that tells me everything I need to know that shows the rest of it's either a lie or kind of covering up the lie. And this is the trouble they put on us. As I've told you, look at UN documents. You start reading about 50% to 75% through, you'll find that it's not the thing that they're talking about. It actually, what they give themselves as authority diminishes and destroys everything they claimed to you in the beginning and to the end. So there's a sentence or two everywhere, savings clauses of authority to themselves. You have to read for. But what about this terror? What motivates this terror that you in the United States are being told it's going to happen to you? Notwithstanding, we find out that the government's doing it, inciting it. What drives a man to blow himself up? What drives a woman to blow themselves up? The woman blowing themselves up, that's a big deal, especially if they've got little ones. What do you do? How do you get someone to go and violate two natural principles in them? Here's what a man who studied every suicide attack in the world says about his motives. He does this report, 4,600 suicide attacks, and they looked at all of them to see what is it that makes someone negate their own existence, contrary to their own nature. And a paraphrase of this whole discussion, which, again, I'll have it linked in the blogcaster. You can read it. It's fascinating. It takes away the whole purpose behind how they would even have motive to come to the United States and do what we're told they're going to do. They want to, the government wants to say it's Islam. They see these patriots, we're going to stop the Muslim and Sharia law and all this nonsense. That's committing to the fraud. Because we find by this story it has nothing to do with religion, actually. In the most part. Again, no absolutes. What 95% of an article of all suicide attacks have in common since 1980 is not religion, but a specific strategic motivation to respond to a military intervention, often specifically a military occupation of territory that the terrorists view as their homeland or prize greatly. I hope you think about that, folks. I want to show you the mirror of America. We have a military occupation on this country, and no one has felt that the land was great enough and a praise enough to defend it, notwithstanding the military's obsessive oaths to say so and to the contrary, that they don't, and that you didn't either. That 95% of the reason for these people to rise up is because of a military intervention, that they're protecting something greatly prized. Should be logical to you as well. That, again, the mirror of that reflects directly what I've been saying. We talk about the Lieber Code, and I tell you about NDAA and the going extrajudicial and what they even denounced about the Lieber Code in the NDAA memo. All interconnected at this point. in this category of logic. Military occupation territory that the terrorists view as their homeland or prize greatly. Something prized greatly. What causes a man to go sacrifice himself but the defense of his family, something he prizes greatly? This is just another natural response. Better than negating your existence for no reason other than a belief. Again, 95% of all suicide attacks are not religion-based. From Lebanon to the West Bank in the 80s and 90s to Iraq and Afghanistan and up through the Paris suicide attacks we've just experienced in the last days, military intervention, and specifically when the military intervention is occupying territory. That's what prompts suicide terrorism more than anything else. Where are we, folks? Talk about right to bear arms. Where are we in America? The military occupation has been on us for 2 centuries now. And nary a proper response happens. I'm not agreeing with it this happens. I'm saying that it hasn't. We've been so dumbed down about our natural instincts. We want to call these Muslims heathens because they're not civilized like us. Their natural sense says, I'm going to go do what it takes, and if I have to lose my life to protect something I prize, my family and my homeland and my way of life, I'm going to do it. This is not about religion. You need to now knock out, there's a study here that makes more sense to me than the opinions I've watched of a bunch of so-called patriots and liberals that think they know what's going on about it. This is the ring that they put in your nose. This is a very interesting discussion. I'd like to really go through it more, but just you can read for yourself. You can pick up these things on your own. They talk about how they've invoked this caliphate, this Islamic State, the IS, which is the thing they value greatly. It's a fiction, but it's the thing that they rally around to create the homeland territory that's going to be what their way of life is that they're protecting, that's greater than every other thing in the world, enough to eliminate the self-preservation intuition they have in themselves that we're up against when we go over there. And we just found out that there's no basis for military intervention of any sort in those lands. The United States just conceded to that. And they want to blame lots of things and people blowing us up here. We're our own problem, folks. Remember, you point the finger out, you got 3 pointing back. I don't know why that seems so clear to me, what the answers really are. And why these puppets, these clowns that come before they parade before us. The political parties, they parade as the only things. Why we don't denounce it all is a fascinating. Again, I'm tossed. Which direction do I go? Is it just mere stupidity or is it just laziness? What is this fascination that people allow in their lives? This was a fascinating read. I won't read more of it. I think once you find out that people are defending their country because of military occupations attacking them, I want to know why would we have a reason to question when they come attack us? But guess what? If the homeland is something greatly prized, is something they attack us for, they have no motivation to come here to do it, do they? There's nothing here in the United States or anywhere outside of their land that they're protecting greater. That's a tactical thing that we would be told at best. There's no actual motivation for someone to come to the United States and as someone with this suicide bombing inclination attack us and blow himself up. It means nothing in the sense of winning his homeland and the thing greatly prized. And they know that. To show you that this report tells you that all these terror attacks are and must be fabricated because there's no actual motivation. It's not religion. It's the protection of their homeland, and to protect their homeland or something greatly prized that they'd act. And coming over here to blow up a couple people doesn't do that. And as we've seen, the proof is all the fact that there has been none that hasn't been orchestrated essentially with the help of the government here. Us, the is us part. That you have to take stock of this. You have to take acknowledgement of this part. Because whether you believe what this report says or not, it's another piece of the puzzle that certainly starts to explain things better than what insanity we see that tries to explain things itself. The hypocrisy that we identify. This is beyond us just saying, oh, these people are criminal, oh, these are corrupt. No, these are psychopaths that have the seats of decision, that keep working to hurt people, and they come here to hurt you. And you're so senseless, you don't see, it's an attack on something you greatly prize. All the things I bring up from child services, rights of child, the UN imposition, the attack on production, the focus on the Agenda 2030 of production and consumption, taking out the landowners on the one side, forcing your behavior on the other. These are all the war fronts that are on us in our land. Agenda 2030 tying migration. What do you think they did in the United States to Detroitify the entire nation through the economic destruction of the monetary system they set up for the fall? All the people that migrated internal to itself. This is another tool, folks, and nobody notices it enough to say, whoa, hold on. I need to rethink, repent. Repent of my old way of thought and programming. There isn't absolutes either, even in the construct of the occupation. And so we see it takes time. The courts of delay are courts of injustice. So it's taken all this time. But we see that these things that they've been putting in front of us for our consumption, we're consuming this fraud, these lies, this criminality. The ring in our nose, we allow that ring to get wounds in it, and they get to pull us because it's so tenderized that we don't even want to touch it. Let them do what they want to do. We'll just follow behind them like nice little pigs to slaughter. Little cattle, the chattel, goyim, I guess we're told. Are you going to agree to that animal nature? You don't even have your animal nature. At least the so-called terrorist has an animal nature that says, I'm going to defend the homeland. The homeland's been attacked in the United States and Canada, all the westernized states, all the modernized states. And not one steps up. But see, they already know you're a terrorist. That's why they defined you as a terrorist before you knew you were one. In the Patriot Act. An enemy combatant back in 1917. Taking away your rights in NDAA 2014, I think it was. They called you a terrorist. They know. They know your inner nature. It sits right there. And yet I hear crickets. I'm not saying to go blow yourself up. I'm telling you that you have to be cognizant of the invasion, the military occupation in your life, and learn to respond to it. And I'm hoping behind the woodshed I'm giving you a whole lot of other things to think about doing before you take the ultimate act. I think like the Second Amendment, that's the ultimate agreement and concession of failure for us today. That there are still glitches even in the corrupt matrix. It takes time. The delay of injustice is upon us. But the courts can come through and make these discussions. It's things for us to at least think about. Inside the system, there's not some people that are heinous and demonic. Some they actually take this a little bit more serious. And every once in a while, like the judge with the saying how unconstitutional and broken the child services system in Texas is. The court rules the Bush administration can be sued for its war on terror conduct. For almost a decade and a half, the people behind the Bush administration's shameful treatment of terrorism suspects have avoided punishment for their crimes, but that may be about to change. The courts have had their say and have ruled that the former Bush administration officials can, in fact, be sued for how they conducted the war on terror. Okay, what about Obama, who didn't stop it? The Nobel laureate for peace, who attacked a defenseless nation compared to its power. Wasn't so defenseless that the big bully the big bully and brute could come and take it out either, did it? But it attacked a defenseless nation with no real cause. It's admitted that. What about Obama now? The whole thing starts to go on its head of the reality of what we've been fed. Like I told you, as reported to me that I reported to you just weeks after the Benghazi thing. I said, don't forget about Benghazi. This whole thing is answered in the fact that Obama is the only one that could have stopped the rescue mission that by protocol happens automatically. As told to me by someone who was involved, happened to be someone I know, didn't know, that was a surprise. I told you that then, who happened to be involved in the establishment of the very protocol that was set up. And why I knew about it, because I didn't talk for him for a week or two after the fact. Well, they were working out what went wrong. Obama. If you didn't get the hint before, that war on terror and their conduct can be sued upon. Folks, those of you that have a cat in a fight, dog in the fight, whatever's going on here, it's another way at them. To me, it doesn't matter that you win or lose. It's that you make the stand. I won't read no more. You go read. Blogcaster has all this. There's more to read. There's just and links to go to, and it's a start for anyone who chooses to accept the responsibility to go after it. The war on terror is a conduct against you if you understand how to turn that around right now. The whole of the entire government is committing this war of terror, folks. That's the actual conduct. Another war that's been failed. We all know this, but here's the proof and the evidence. This is what I'm trying to get you to see. You speak to the system right now as if your entire existence is a court case. You have to prepare your facts, and you have to be able to articulate them cleanly without gibberish. You have to be able to assign those together to an element of a cause, which is a conduct, a misconduct that causes a harm. It's just a misconduct that causes no harm isn't even actionable, even though there's a misconduct. It has to cause someone harm. This is your so-called common law. This is the boots on the ground. This is where it hurts us. When it finally causes harm, and that conduct has been described in black and white, the objective basis by whomever is the authority to say so, that it has caused you harm and was misconduct. That you bring those together in a simple, concise, easy to understand form without all the gibberish and all the other things. You know you're enforcing your constitutional rights. You don't have to speak about them in the brief. You're enforcing them by bringing the brief in a plain statement of harm by some element. That's how you affect your constitutional rights. You don't have to give all the case laws in your complaint. That's the gibberish. Just do what you're supposed to do. Stop talking about your right to do it. The United States government declares another war, concedes another war is a failure. And we all can go immediately to know which one. We can have, a whole list of them. One of them is the war on drugs. It admits, finally, it's a failure. Headline, reading it. The war on drugs officially kicked off in 1971 when President Nixon addressed the nation in the press conference explaining how the recent passage of the Comprehensive Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act of 1970 would provide the legal framework and material support for a new kind of war, the war on drugs. Material support, folks. That word right there. It was a war against you. That material support is the term of action of the conduct for materially supporting a terrorism in your life. This was a war of terror, using the excuse of drugs in order to do that. And the way they describe this right here, this guy named Dylan Charles, the material support would be one of the elements. But this act was the material support for the terrorism caused through the now conceded war failure of the war on drugs. Nixon said we must wage what I have called a total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs. Now, who's supposed to declare war, folks? See, this whole thing's on its head. And yet we agreed. We never stepped up and said, whoa, that's not, you can't do that. But see, back in 1917, they kind of threw everything on its head, didn't they? Because then, that's why I keep telling you about the commerce wars that went on. That's why we have the 1917 Act is still going. It's still an emergency from which they can use all commerce as an attack. That they can. It's an ongoing. It's not really a declaration of war, but an expansion of the subject matter that is the war already declared. Which in 1933 they removed you from the exception of its application. It's all written for us, folks. But this war goes on. There's an interview that's made. Michael Botticelli, he talks about it. He goes, this whole thing is a failed. the war on drugs and all the focus to the work that we do, it portrays that what we are clinging to kind of failed policies and failed practices in the past. And then Scott Pelley answering the question: Are you saying the way we have waged the war on drugs for the more than 40 years has been all wrong? Botticelli answers: It has been all wrong. Out of the words of the government itself, no opinion, folks. Here is the evidence of a war of terror against you. The whole purpose for the monies of the military equipment now going to your local cops' shops is because of this war. You have the evidence now to pull together and a bit more to go down to your local counties and cities and say, take away this military hardware. You don't have a legitimate purpose. It was unlawful what they've been doing. Are you going to get heard? I don't know, but at least they're saying that. They're using this monopoly oppression, this prohibition, in order to build and expand and improve a pharmacological industry that's killing us in all other areas. Like I said before, I've not been one in marijuana. I've never really, there's never anything I could see people, it just never was a thing for me. And didn't really think about it too much. Then recently, with this new movement, we got to legalize it. I didn't understand why it was why it was even an issue to begin with. It was a plant to me, but I didn't see any purpose for it. But when it finally came out, the proof and the internet and the YouTube and the information coming out that like any plant, the constituent parts of which could be helpful, found out this plant is very helpful. That was prohibited was the reason why they prohibited it. When you look at the bottom line was to make industry, which is the bottom line of the nation, for its GDP. They can't make money when they got some medicines they can fabricate and stuff down your throat. But when they got a plant outside your house, it does a lot of things in the most profitable areas of their monopoly business. The control of pharmacological chemicals. That was the first reason, but that it actually had medicinal qualities over the law shows you that legal is not lawful and the law is wrong. But I told you there was a commercial component that everyone seems to be missing about how to answer. In other words, if you go into court, you say, listen, they've mischaracterized these things to make them fit in the law of commerce, and I wasn't doing commerce. That's an avoidance. No, don't do it that way. In fact, some places you don't have to. Some places you have to do a little better than that. I'm just saying your statement before you go and arrange the jurisdiction would be that the citation that claims to be commerce related is actually a mischaracterization in order to have the state gain a fraudulent advantage. That's an avoidance. Whether you win or not is irrelevant, but it makes a record that's appealable in this corrupt system anyway. At least you have that. You didn't have that if you didn't do it, which most people don't. But we have a plant that's a fabulous medicine, not by what I say. I don't take it, don't know it, don't have a clue. But by other people's needs that actually shows as a purpose that the federal law says there is no purpose. That the legalization for medical marijuana of which in each state countermands the federal diktat to throw it down should be enough for you to also bring together to show your local people that are going to take these military hardwares and whatever they're doing to take money on the war on drugs to be able to stop it so there's one less oppression in your life. Because if you start to push this out, you also realize your local state laws that so-called legalize it, those are wrong too. Why? Because they put an imposition on a natural plant that has medical uses and is not otherwise a violation. That gets us over, what about intoxication? Well, that's only relevant to commercial uses and commercial like operations. Otherwise, it's strict liability, so you better not do things. You better not do anything while you're trying to be responsible. That's why I don't understand why people do any drugs anymore when they have little ones. Anytime you're under the weather of a pharmaceutical, or legal or otherwise, you got little ones' responsibility that can come up with any time to surprise you. So I've never understood the lack of respect that people had for themselves and their offspring about doing drugs at all in that regard. That's the strict liability part. That's really not actionable by the state, but they've turned this thing on its head so it makes it look like it is. But the court makes this ruling. Really, I mean, come on. This is showing that there is some, even though we were saying that there was no accountability and no remedy, there is, for those of you that will be able to articulate the war on terror as a war of terror. The war on drugs is a war of terror against people, using the drug as no different like climate change is being used to terrorize you or your industries or your production into compliance and under continuous attack. Is how we start to stop this, recognizing these points and how they are wrong. Stop allowing them to keep dumping this stuff on us. Part of how that happens is internally taking advantage of the ability that's still available. There's this thing called jury trials. When you get them into these corrupt courts, you can go onto those courts and you can be the odd man or woman out to determine, like they have been in lots of places. I think Texas is one of them. The drug law, the marijuana laws are obsoleted. We're going to drop charges, or we're going to diminish the charges, or we're going to eliminate the charges as a jury. They're obsoleted because of this lie we found out. The judge drops jury tampering charges against Denver jury nullification activists. Someone who would give generic information to all people in the front of a courthouse was recognized, about jury nullification, was just recognized by a judge as not being the felonies he was charged with. That you here now have this story. If you didn't know about it and you're interested in jury nullification, here's a new story that you can pull. I'd go back, I'd do more research about it to find out the back end. But what's happening here, and this is really important, it's not just that this guy was charged, Kenneth Plotz, that's the judge. Kenneth Plotz was a judge who dropped 7 felony jury tampering charges on Wednesday in the case of the 2 Colorado-based jury nullification activists who had been arrested for handing out informative jury flyers of jury nullification outside of the courthouse. This he does because they were doing it to no one in particular and everybody in general. You need to know that status, that this one judge now, it doesn't mean you're going to win everywhere, but you can bring this out and you can actually get a qualification on this. That the district attorney actually was, in this state, was up against another decision where he acted to charge this guy. I'm trying to find the name. So I go through and I see these stories and just get the idea. Eric Brandt and Mark Iannicelli. They were handing out flyers for jury nullification generally. They did not target any particular juror. And that was the reason, based on the complaint, that the judge dropped 7 felony charges. These are serious now. And the worst point that I said this case is not over, is that the DA had noticed before that what those people were doing was not actually unlawful. And that sets up a problem for the attorney. And I commented on a Twitter back on this case that the bigger story here isn't just that they got knocked, that these felony charges got dropped, but it's the fact that the DA was rabid and he was derelict in his official duty to go after these people, which makes this story not ending quite yet. And appears by the report that their attorney that was defending them sees that too, and may actually be going after this abuse of authority, malicious prosecution, dereliction of official duty. These things may actually come out that become the opportunity now in a response, in a response of attack and defense against the abuse of the Bar Association sitting in that seat of control. Because one judge finally said, no, what you're stated here he's done can't be done, and we have prior precedent that you completely ignored as a state prosecutor. showing that these people, when they don't do inside their office, there is an action you can take against them. What I'm trying to show you, because if you can come in and you can show in an intake, this is why they probably won't allow this record to be made, that they mischaracterized a status in order to get you into the system. That's a felony on the official side. This is the kind of thing I'm telling you. We're in a war. They want to hit you with something, you got to have a retaliatory strike to come back, or a defense that deflects the shot. I don't get all wrapped up in how that works. I just start doing it, and I feel like it's more a Aikido, where you're using their momentum against them. Once they start a momentum, they're defenseless against it, against the momentum it creates. And you can take that, and you can use it to expose them. We have this war on drugs that has devastated us as a people. It was a lie. It didn't work. Again, like climate change, bad theories. Sociologists, psychopathic sociologists, psychologists creating these policies that we all work on. The same thing is going through with now the computerization of your education system. And going into this technocracy tool for the implementation of the plan. And this problem we're having with CISA now, I started the broadcast with the saying, hey, they passed the bill, they stuffed something in, they stuffed it in on a have to pass, which they didn't have to pass, but this is what they excuse it away on. And we talk about our lives are being constrained now to a digital life. I've told you about that flicking switch they can pull. That it comes off, that we talk about war, and the new war always here, that it comes up that more devastating than any nuclear war, John McAfee on the coming cyber war with is, I think is a big telltale, it's a big fairy tale to start with, except to the extent that our lives are digital. And if you don't understand that the effect of a cyber war that your government pulls against itself underneath the cover of is or anybody else, that it could not be more devastating than a nuclear war, you're not paying attention. And this brought up a whole other set of thoughts that I don't know if I probably don't have time to talk about here. But this type of when he brought up this idea of nuclear war, there's been some ideas that we're going to be going to nuclear war, as we might have heard it written in the books in the final days and all the Armageddon and all that stuff. Nobody, 99% of the population gets destroyed by nuclear war. Everyone thinks it's literal. When McAfee brings this up as nuclear war, and it's actually cyber war, and you understand how the digital interrelation of computers is with everything you need in life, that when he says this is more devastating than a nuclear war, if we translate that nuclear Armageddon that we were looking for this cyber war, this took on a whole much more ominous tale than even the one that he's pointing out, except to tell you this will be devastating and don't look for the flash. Maybe that the revolution won't be televised because everything will be down, because we are engaged in a digital world anymore and didn't make alternatives to it. So thank you for tuning in today. Again, I didn't even get partially down my tabs. I always try to work better on that, but those of you that tuned in, again, Merry Christmas, Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Hanukkah, and Ramalama Ding Dong, Gista, Mitha, Krishna, happy holiday, and do what you can to love the ones you're with. I'm not so much into these holidays anymore, but I do appreciate the people that are around me, and I think that's the best that we can do for that, and we get away from what we are wanting to have imposed upon us. We isolate ourselves, and we bring purpose to and principle for us is probably the biggest gift I can give to all y'all to start doing in our lives and get us to the next point that removes this insanity, this madness, the lack of causation for the harm that's in the world, that brings a real peace on mankind, not humankind, mankind, not the animals, not what they want to do for us, but what we want to do for ourselves and our own. So thank you again. Donate where you can. The servers, WT, worldtruth.org, Social Network, RealLibertyMedia.com, UCY.tv, FM broadcasters and EAM broadcasters. Promote the broadcast, folks. I don't do that so well. See if we can get on other networks. It'd be great. And you can contact me, markonthebco.com. Take care.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Well, that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.